Welcome. Let's get rock and rolling. So real quick, my name is Jim Barnes. I happen to be one of the managing partners at Invista and also the co-founder of Invista. 30-second dialogue on Invista. We're about a 625-person consulting firm based upon Indianapolis, Indiana. We've got 6 locations around the world. Again, focusing on supply chain, execution, consulting, and also intellectual property that we've built as well. So what we're here to talk about is this subject around WMS, warehouse management systems, warehouse control systems, which is WCS, versus WES, which is now what we call warehouse execution system. Provide some clarity around what 3 do, what they don't do. Sometimes I think it's easier to talk about what they don't do versus what they do. And just kind of walk you through a couple of use cases as well. So if you look through it, we're going to talk about the definition of WMS, WCS, and WES. We're going to talk about that day in the life of an order, because I think sometimes it's helpful to understand what does what, when, where, and how. Talk about some standard interface architecture, because at the end of the day, you will be integrating with something. You'll be integrating into some kind of mechanization and ERP and order management, but you're always going to have integration. So you might as well know what those standard integration files look like. Talk about a few case studies. We'll talk about one of our clients who took a path that quite frankly didn't work out very well. We'll talk about why. We'll talk about a client who actually did an exceptional job figuring out which systems of record they actually use as they actually run a pretty sophisticated automated facility as well. And then we'll open up for Q&A. So I've got about 45 minutes. I'll probably finish early. I have a tendency to talk fast, if you can't already tell. So I will try to do my best to actually slow it down. And if there's questions that come up, again, this doesn't have to be a monologue, this can be a dialogue. Raise your hand, ask the question, I'll repeat it for the actual audience, and then provide some input, or quite frankly, if others in the room have ideas, because again, there's no monopoly on ideas, share your thoughts about things that you've actually done and you've seen. Make sense? All right? So let's talk about what a warehouse management system is. We look at a WMS as really a highly specialized business application for the purpose of really managing two things. Actually, I would say 3. The receipt of inventory coming into a distribution center or warehouse, right? PO receipts, an advanced ship notice. That could be a cart level ASN. It could be a pallet level ASN. Surprisingly, I'll get on my soapbox here, is that I think most distributors, if you were to raise your hand, or retailers, do a very, very poor job with advanced ship notices. Today, I'm just curious, raise the hands who uses EDI to receive an advanced ship notice coming into the warehouse. So ASNs, right? Some EDI. You know, it's really surprisingly that you're trying to automate or even trying to improve the receiving operation within a distribution center, but you quite frankly still use purchase orders or key recs to receive product into the actual 4 walls, which blows me away that you're not getting an advanced ship notice, which is called an ASN. It's an EDI 856 file format. So I'll get off my soapbox there. The second thing that you're doing is you're managing inventory. You have to know where inventory is within the 4 walls. That's not only static in a forward pick location, a reserve location, but also in transit, work in process. What's sitting on the receiving docks? What's sitting basically in a transferable location before I put it into a reserve location? So where is inventory sitting relatively near time or real time within the 4 walls? That's the second thing that a warehouse management system is doing for you. The third is it's in that last bullet point. It's managing order flow, right? And it's managing the tasking around the actual order flows as well. So if I release an order, it could be a discrete order, it could be a wave of orders. You'll hear me use the term wave. It's a very popular term in the world of warehouse management system called waving orders. For those who don't know, waving is actually a military term. It's a logistics term that came out of the military. There are a lot of WMS providers who like to sit there and tell you, I created the word wave. That's not true. Waves actually came from the military on how do I release a wave of resources to go fight a battle. So that's where the term came from, for those who do not know. So that's what a warehouse management system is doing. It's managing receipts of inventory. It's managing where inventory is within the four walls, both statically and dynamically and in process. And it's also managing the order flows and the tasking, right? Keyword, tasking that's happening within the four walls, okay? Basically, that's what a WMS is doing. Oh, here we go. So again, to be redundant, but not just to prove the point here, we're verifying receipts, we're tracking and controlling inventory, we're managing balance on hand, we're allocating orders, and obviously we're shipping product. Many warehouse management systems, and this is kind of a rub, many warehouse management systems lack a key component, right? The key component is around shipping execution. So how do I actually print a carrier compliant label? How do I print a bill of lading, which could be a VIX standard bill of lading, or a parcel carrier label to put on an actual box? So you'll find a lot of WMS providers will not have that shipping execution manifesting system, so therefore there's a whole industry around shipping execution. ProWares, ShipStation, right, to name a few. Are there WMS providers that have shipping execution? The answer is yes, but again, as you're looking for your warehouse management system, you have to ask that question, who's handling shipping execution? Not to be confused with, transportation management, right, which is a TMS. What does a transportation management system do? A TMS is going to help you with inbound load planning and optimization. It's going to help you with outbound load planning optimization. It may help you with routing. So again, as you look through the provider landscape, you've got to ask those key questions, really, who's going to handle shipping execution, and do I really need transportation planning? Some providers in the software industry provide that. So for example, I'll use a Manhattan Associates. Manhattan Associates has a transportation management system. They do shipping execution. There are other providers that don't actually have those key components. But when looking for systems of records, you need to understand who's going to handle that shipping component, right? So let's talk about so most warehouse management systems, as we kind of look at what's included or not included, most are going to handle some data collection. Not the data collection device, but your ability to actually connect to the warehouse management system, connect to the database with something like wireless or voice, right? So if I'm picking in a forward pick location or I'm doing replenishment on a forklift, I'm using a data collection device, making a call to the database to actually manage that task. We're also going to manage things around barcodes, okay? So our ability to actually manage the labels, or what we call license plate numbers, or inbound license plate numbers, outbound license plate numbers. Again, it's all terminology depending upon what software system you're using. I'm managing multiple labels to actually scan the product and do grabbing it from a location and putting it to another location. How am I doing that? I'm doing that with a barcode. Choose your barcode symbology. UCC 128s, code 3 of 9, Interleave 205. There's multiple barcode technologies that are out there that your warehouse management system providers support, okay? We're doing some level of conveyor, or I would call integration, but again, I'm not controlling the conveyors or controlling my mechanism with the warehouse management system. We're going to control that. We start talking about warehouse control and warehouse execution. I'm not actually controlling the machine language, right, or the PLCs with my WMS. Okay, I've been making a call or request, but the actual control is being handled by either my WES or my WCS. And then obviously, as I mentioned, we're doing things like RFID tags. If I need to enable RFID tags, and I mentioned lastly, we're enabling RF devices. Okay? Any questions regarding what is a WMS? And I guess raise our hands today, who's running some level of warehouse management system within their four walls today? Who's running WMS? Most of you, okay, good. So what's a warehouse control system? A warehouse control system really is real-time integration controls that are managing the material handling equipment, right, within my four walls. So if I were to put a carton on a conveyor, and I needed to divert that carton left or right, just using a very simple example. The warehouse control system is looking at that barcode and saying, based upon logic, do I divert left to UPS or divert right to FedEx? The warehouse management system is not making that decision, right? The warehouse control system is making that decision. It's firing off, right, and saying, when I see this simple Boolean logic, if then else statements, this is what I want you to do with that particular LPN, okay? You may, right or wrong, take feedback from the warehouse control system back to the WMS and say, WMS, here's what I've done with it. 9 times out of 10, most warehouse control systems are not taking information and data back to the WMS. It's typically a one-way feed. The WMS is saying, I need to ship this product. It's on the carton's on the conveyor. The warehouse control system is saying, I got it. I know the LPN. Very simple, discrete, binary, 0 or 1 type logic. Take this LPN and sort it to this particular FedEx or UPS sorter. Make sense? That's what you're doing with a warehouse control system. Here's the other big thing. The speed. You notice that in warehouse management system, I said near time versus real time, okay? With a warehouse control system, it is truly, truly real time. You are making calls within milliseconds. Why? If I'm moving a carton over an inline scale or print and apply, I'm moving a carton down a shoe sorter, I'm moving at 300 to 500 linear feet per minute, if not faster, right? I'm flying. So the amount of time to hit that database, right, is almost instantaneously, because I'm making a request, I'm coming back with an input, I'm coming back with an output. Much different than hitting a relationship type database, okay? So again, WCS exchange real-time communications, a millisecond command processing discrete type information, obviously on your mechanization. So let's talk about this thing called warehouse execution for a second. And why is there a warehouse execution market? Well, it's very simple, right? You have material handling integration companies out here, the Schaefers, the Honeywells, right, which now own Intelligrated, the Domatics of the world. You have consulting firms out there that sell, quite frankly, a niche. They're looking into a warehouse and looking through a distribution center, and they said, wow, this thing is heavily automated, right? Do I really need to go put in a warehouse management system like a High Jump or a JDA or Manhattan, to use those 3 examples, when I'm in this highly automated facility? And oh, by the way, right or wrong, I own the relationship, right? I'm Domatic, I own the relationship. I can manage inventory. I can do data collection. And so what's really happened is the warehouse execution space has grown up because I think, A, there's been a market need for it in more highly automated facilities. But the other thing, too, that a warehouse execution system is doing for you is I find it much more dynamic. You're seeing a lot of warehouse execution providers adding basically AI, and you're starting to add basically machine learning to the warehouse execution system to provide dynamic feedback loops. And I'll talk about that here shortly. So again, warehouse execution system optimizes balance, how workflows form to automated equipment. And that's a key word, right? It's really, I look at a warehouse execution system as being really beyond managing what's happening in the 4 walls. It is providing a dynamic feedback loop. If something were to change within the 4 walls, how do I reprioritize my orders? Okay? So here's a good example. If I released a wave in my warehouse management system and I was simply doing a pick and pass operation and I had a bunch of conveyor doing pick and pass between zones, what happens when I release this huge wave, right, and the priorities of those orders change? Well, the warehouse management system, it's gone. Orders have been created, tasks have been created, so now you've got cartons and LPNs and items being picked in forward pick locations that need to be reprioritized. Who's going to do those who's going to reprioritize that? It's not going to be the warehouse management system, because again, those tasks have already been created and gone. So warehouse execution systems have kind of come up through the ranks of saying, look, give me that logic, I'll manage those orders for you, right? Because the warehouse management system isn't going to do it. The warehouse control system is dumb. It's just kind of basically doing what it's told. It's simply zeros or ones. So warehouse execution providers have come up through the ranks and said, you know, I'll be the brains after you've released the orders. I'll manage dynamically what happens and reprioritize those orders, and I'll also communicate to the warehouse control system the changed priorities. Make sense? That's really where warehouse executions have come up. So I kind of look at it this way. I like to use analogies. So all analogies break down over time, and I would even say that this chart is starting to become a little aged. But here's the reality. I look at a warehouse management system as being a brain. If you're looking at the anatomy of a human body, I look at the warehouse management system kind of being the brains in the four walls, okay? I look at the warehouse control system as being your central nervous system today, okay? It's managing and firing off, right, for lack of better terms, brain synapses. It's saying, hey, give me something to do, fire off a message, right? Move my arm, move my leg, right? Move my head. It's managing, right, those basically controls at the lowest common denominator. The warehouse execution system is kind of the feedback mechanism today. I look at it as being, hey, now you've done something, the plan's changed. What happens next? What do you do now? Right? It's kind of that feedback mechanism that says, hey, I released a bunch of orders, the priority of these orders have changed, I just got an onslaught of overnight orders. How do I induct them into my automation system today and reprioritize those orders? Or if I'm running a put wall, an example, how do I reprioritize my replenishments to my put wall because something has actually happened in terms of my order priority? Make sense? Okay? So, as I said before, sometimes it's easy to explain what systems are not. I look at a warehouse management system, again, it's not going to control the machine language, ladder logic of your PLCs. It's not designed to actually do that, okay? It's not going to control starters and motors. It's not going to control your put-to-light system, or if you have an ASRS, or you have print and apply. It's not managing the firing of your automation within your four walls, okay? It's typically not going to track LPN's automation equipment. It has no idea, I use my pick and pass example before. If I release a wave and I've inducted a carton onto a conveyor, it has no idea where that carton is on the conveyor. Now my warehouse control system does, my warehouse execution system may, but my warehouse management system has no idea what's really happening real time within my four walls, okay? It's not that this is a big deal. You're not going to see a pretty graphical user interface and AutoCAD layout of your conveyor system. And it's not, again, as I talked about, not dynamically allocating and balancing orders across your facility. So warehouse control systems typically are not going to interface with your ERP. Okay, we're talking about, we're way down here in the weeds when it comes to actual system of record. It's not going to allocate inventory and reserve or forward pick locations, okay? So again, you can kind of see the difference. It's not going to be your inventory of record. It's not going to know where inventory is real time within your forward pick locations or reserve locations. Typically not going to have a whole lot of extensive cycle counting capabilities. Not going to manage labor and allocation. And we talked about transportation, planning, execution. Again, that warehouse control system is really down in the weeds, managing the actual machine control layer of your equipment today, okay? Warehouse execution system, typically not going to manage inventory. Again, I've said there are exceptions to the actual norm. You're starting to see warehouse execution systems, right or wrong, kind of bump warehouse management systems out of the equation, especially as the system becomes much more automated, okay? So as I move heavily into automation, both robotics, unit sorters, it could be a tilt tray sorter, it could be a cross belt sorter, it could be an ASRS, it could be a multi-shuttle system. You're seeing warehouse management system providers getting pushed out because the warehouse execution system providers can manage what's happening within that mechanization, okay? Again, WES are not extensive cycle counting and physical inventory. There's always exceptions. Is that me or you? Is that me? So a little hard to read. I think this is in your diagram you've got. If you don't have one, I think we may be short. you can come by our booth and pick up additional copies of this. But you can see what's happening is WMS on the left-hand side, WCS on the right-hand side, warehouse execution systems being in the middle, and quite frankly, warehouse execution systems are starting to make a move left and right on this particular diagram, okay? Now, there are certain software providers, and I'll name them, Softion, who's here today. They don't have a warehouse execution system. Why? Because it's already embedded. So their warehouse management systems, by just default and architecture, already has a built-in warehouse execution system doing dynamic feedback within it, okay? So again, the question really comes down to when you're looking for a piece of software to run your facility, and I think I had a conversation with the gentleman from Coors, Molson here, is that I think it comes down to a few things. It really comes down to the following questions. On the spectrum of automation, how automated or non-automated is the facility, okay? First and foremost. Two, who is going to be managing inventory? Okay, that's key. We've got into a lot of philosophical debates on, quite frankly, who is a system of record for inventory. And when I mean by inventory, I mean every component in the actual warehouse and every single unit of measure. Each interpack, case, pallet quantities, right? Or even unit measures like drums, rolls. It doesn't really matter. Who is a system of record of inventory? That's key, right? Because the reality is you can't make any of this cool stuff happen if you don't know where in the heck inventory is real time, period, right? Let me get that across everybody's brains. If you do not know where inventory is in your warehouse real time, none of this matters. So you have to determine, right, if it's SAP EWM, as an example, if it's Manhattan, is the warehouse execution, warehouse control system, you better know where inventory is real time in the warehouse. Make that decision first. Who's going to control it? The second thing is who's going to be managing your order flow. I don't care about receipts because receipts are very simple. It's ultimately who's going to be managing the order flow across your facility. And if it's omni-channel, right? If you're truly an omni-channel retailer or you're an omni-channel company that has got direct-to-consumer, you've got a wholesale business and you're doing retail store replenishment, who best to manage and orchestrate the order flow across those types of channels unless you've got dedicated buildings by channel, right? But then the struggle with dedicated building by channel is a thing called inventory. Because now I've got inventory perpetuated across multiple DCs, which is not really, really efficient, right? So again, you got to figure out who's going to manage inventory, who's going to manage the order orchestration at the lowest common discrete level. But the reality is there is a convergence. The lines are becoming blurred between WMS providers, WES, and WCS. You have warehouse management system providers now building WES systems. You've got integrators out here and material handling equipment providers buying WMS solutions and building out WES. So again, the world is becoming very, very blurred as it relates to what system of record you need to manage inventory, orders, and receipts, and the tasking right within the four walls. Let's talk about day in life on order. This is just really, really simple to kind of prove the point. If you look up here, I'm going to get orders from an ERP or an order management system. I'm going to soft allocate inventory, okay? Why? Because my ERP application doesn't need to know where, or my order management system doesn't really know where inventory is in the four walls. It just needs to know that I've got inventory in the four walls. Make sense? It doesn't really care that it's in A01, A01, forward pick location, or a dynamic location. It just needs to know I have the inventory in the four walls. Once the order is given the WMS, the warehouse management system is going to go through some type of order release, a waiving process, a discrete order release process. It's going to hard allocate the inventory and saying, I know based upon a to be picked location this is the best place to go pick this product based upon the right material flow. If it's a simple pick and pass, it's a pick to cart, pick to tote, right? It's going to manage that process for you. It's going to hard allocate the inventory from a location. The warehouse control system is going to take over and say, now that I've inducted, in my example, this is a simple AutoCAD layout of a pick and pass. Now that I've inducted the carton into this pick and pass by zone, I now know how to route the carton between zones. Make sense? So if I had a 3-line order, let's say it had to be picked here, here, and here, I'm going to actually allocate the inventory from these 4 pick locations. The warehouse control system is going to move that LPN between zones and say, yes, I'm here, I'm confirmed, right, I got it, now go to the next zone. Now, the warehouse control system is smart enough to know, hey, if this zone is full and I got to get routed, go route me to the next location or next zone, and then I'll come back and pick up that location because I'm not yet picked, right? It has that level of intelligence. But that gives you just kind of a simple day in the life order flow, pre-warehouse execution systems. If I add, come on, here we go. If I add the warehouse execution component, now I have the ability to add some feedback mechanism that says, hey, look, reprioritize this. I mean, here's a great example. We have a direct-to-consumer e-commerce company that ships on an average day, non-peak, 25,000 orders a day. Not hard to really manage, okay? And the capacity of the facility handles 75,000 orders per day over a 20-hour work period. During peak, they go to 100,000 plus orders per day, right? So I don't have enough capacity to handle all the order volume. So we put in a warehouse execution system to deal with that order flow. And so what is it doing? It's almost like shuffling a bunch of cards. I've got a bunch of cards. I'm adding, right, stuff to the mix, and I'm reshuffling based upon transit time, order priority, right, and what we call promise days to the customer. And so the warehouse execution system reprioritizes the orders based upon equipment capacity and says, hey, based upon transit time, order priority, also the number of picks per carton, how do I reshuffle this mix to get the most out of my equipment so my equipment doesn't become underutilized? So it's handling that feedback mechanism and talking to the warehouse control system to make those order dynamic priority changes. Make sense? Okay? So I won't bore you with a lot of interface systems architecture, but the reality is you're going to have something like this. You're going to have a PO header detail or an ASN come to you. You're going to have some kind of receipt detail go back up to the warehouse, to your ERP application. You're going to have this thing called an item master, right or wrong. I have to know here what items I'm picking by unit of measure. I need to know things like dim weights if I'm doing cartonization logic. That's all going to be with my WMS and my WS. I'm going to have sales order header and details coming from my ERP host, and we'll probably put a line there called OMS as well. And coming back, I'm going to be sending back shipment detail, right, in terms of pick confirmations. So if I shorted the pick, I was off by 1 unit, off by 1 line, I've got to tell the host, right, so I can inform my call center, quite frankly, hey, you wanted 2 lines, I only picked 1 line. It's going to be a backorder situation. That feedback mechanism is handling back up to the actual host, okay? Inventory adjustments. I will make this, and I'm pretty strong upon this. There should never be an inventory adjustment except for financial reasons at the ERP level. Your warehouse management, or if you're using a WS, becomes a system of record within the 4 walls. Always your adjustments will be managed within the 4-wall system of record, which is WMS or WS, not ERP or host. You may make a write-off financially at your host or your ERP, but the system of record to make those inventory adjustments based upon cycle counts or a short pick or anything, I put a forklift through the actual pallet location, and I've got to write something off or I've got to put something on hold, is all happening at that lowest common denominator, okay? So those are pretty standard system interface architectures, and you will go through those. I don't care what you're putting in. You pick your poison, you pick your provider, you will go through this documentation or this particular layout every single time you walk through a new implementation of WS or WCS. So case studies, I've got about 14 minutes. So here's a good example of what not to do. So this was a $800 million fashion apparel company. They selected a warehouse tier 1 WMS. They had a warehouse control system required for put to light. However, the WCS was used for their discrete order picking. So let me tell you what happened. So a material handling equipment provider, right, was the key primary on this particular project. And they put in this wonderful put to light system. The warehouse management system provider came in afterwards, and ultimately, and this is key, and I have a saying, whoever has the relationship with you ultimately is going to try to drive their point system, right? So in this case here, the primary contractor, whereas the integrator, and the integrator had a warehouse execution and warehouse control system. So they were trying to push their own RF picking system in the forward pick locations. Here's what happened. Their warehouse control system had no basis for inventory. So it's not the system of record for inventory. So when a picker went to the forward pick location to go pick an item and it wasn't there, they're like, that's not my problem. We're assuming the inventory is always right. That's what I always tell you, and then what I'm saying in my presentation to you, you've got to understand who the system of record is for the inventory. So what do you have? You got a bunch of finger pointing, right? Well, it's not my problem. I'm just simply data collection. I go to location, it should be there, but you don't manage the inventory. So we ultimately ended up ripping out the warehouse control system to do the data collection and the RF picking, and use the best system, which was a warehouse management system, to actually do the forward picking in this particular example. Make sense? Okay? So again, as I said, the WSS assumed inventory was always in the forward pick location, did not manage, allocate, and control inventory. Let's talk about more of a real success story. So this is a $4 billion omni-channel shoe retailer, first cost manufacturer of shoes, and retailer over 1,500, I think I over have 1,500 retail locations. And they also have a wholesale business. Picked a WMS, right, tier 1 WMS, to actually manage inbound receipts. They used it for directed put away. They also used it for replenishment to their tilt tray sorter, and they used it to manage the forward pick locations in their accessory business, right? Okay. We use the warehouse control system to actually manage all the conveyor, all the print and apply, all the inline scales, all the Cubiscans, and all the data collection to 17 outbound lanes. And then we use the tilt tray control WES to manage the actual tilt tray. Now granted, there was systems integration that had to be done between 3 different systems. But the point is, we use the appropriate system of record to manage, right, what was happening from an inventory and order flow perspective. We didn't use the warehouse management system to try to control the tilt tray sorter, and we didn't use the warehouse control system to manage inbound receipts. We chose and selected the right system of record to manage the job. Now one could debate, and I debated this, and I quite frankly lost, to be honest with you. I didn't think we needed a warehouse management system. I really thought we could do this with a warehouse execution and a warehouse control system, because the fact that we spent a ton of money, right, not us, the client did, on simply managing inbound receipts, some simple forward pick locations, and replenishment. And I really thought that we could do this with a warehouse execution system and save us a ton of money. I lost that battle. It was still a very successful client. But the point of the conversation is, regardless, It goes back, and I hate to sound redundant here, it goes back to inventory, orchestration, and overall flow within the actual system, overall distribution system in terms of who's managing the actual task, okay? So, lessons learned. Understand which WMS and WCS and now WS does the best for your business. Lines are getting blurred. Understand how the physical movement inventory and unit measures move through your facility. Again, the simpler it is, single channel, right? I can make a good argument of not using a warehouse management system in a single channel, lights out building, okay? Manual versus automated. How manual versus automated are you? Okay, if I'm a 3PL and I'm managing multiple clients in a shared facility, I'm going to use a warehouse management system. Done. I'm going to tell you right now, done. But if I'm in a knockout, blackout building with an ASRS, and I'm doing advanced ship notice receiving, right? And I got unit sorters in the back end, flowing product right to my transportation trailers, I can make a hard business case. I do not need a warehouse management system. I can do that with a warehouse execution and warehouse control system. Again, use a solution architect that knows both technologies. And I guess the other big lesson learned is happy path workflows, but more importantly, please, 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 when you're putting the systems or you're making any changes, it is 100% about exception management. Anybody can come in with happy path, user acceptance testing, unit testing. It is all the exceptions, right, that will kill you when you go live in a system like this. So I'm talking about major stress testing, and not stress testing just systemically. One of the reasons why we were successful here is that not only did we stress test it systemically, right, using an application called Load Runner to manage things both asynchronously and synchronously through the actual architecture, we ran tons and tons and tons of volume through the actual facility, okay? Tons of volumes to prove, right, we could actually get the actual volume that we needed in every single subcomponent and making sure that everything worked correctly. So it's not a matter of focusing on the happy path, it's really focusing on the exception management component. And then last but not least, when there are exceptions, because there are going to be exceptions, who operationally manages those exceptions? How do you fix them? Okay? So somebody who's a practitioner who's been doing this for 25 plus years, simple example. If I've got a carton come down a hospital lane, how do I fix it? It's there for a reason. Operationally, who's going to fix it? How do they fix it? What inquiry systems they look at to go sit there and say, first of all, why are you here? And now that you're here, what do I do? Right? Again, it's those exception management, not only systemically, but operationally, that you can't lose sight of. Okay? So, with that said, I've got 6 minutes. I think we'll take any questions, any thoughts, anything you guys want to share amongst yourselves. Yes, sir.
You're saying that the WES should be controlled, and the WES is able to rearrange the meters.
Yeah, so the question was, does the warehouse execution system, can it manage the flow, right, dynamically between pickers? And the answer is yes. There are certain warehouse execution systems and even WMS applications that, quite frankly, will not even hard allocate. They'll soft allocate inventory. So they're dynamically running through an optimization engine real time, looking for ways to actually manage the best pick path, right? And so warehouse execution system, and even some warehouse management systems do that as well, right? Okay. Yeah, I mean, a big challenge in warehouse, in any distribution center, is give me the fact that you're going to have short picks, right? So you're going to have a bunch of orders that get released. You're going to have units and lines that need to get picked from 4 pick locations. And then the question is, who's going to sweep up, right? Who's going to sweep up those remaining picks? Because maybe the replenishment didn't get there in time. You had the inventory. You needed 10, right? You've got 100 in the building, but in the 4 pick location, you only have 8. So you're missing 2. who's going to sweep up that? You know, a warehouse execution or even a WMS dynamically reassign that task and say, hey, go sweep up those two and start doing what I call more interleaving. Other questions or thoughts? I'm done if you guys are done. All right? Thank you, guys.